Kia ora. Welcome to Analyst's Point of View. I am Maddie Pont, and we have created this podcast to educate people within the sports industry about performance analysis, what it is, and what analysts do behind the scenes. Over this series, we'll get together guests who have experience with performance analysis to share stories, experiences, and visions, and hope to grow the understanding of the sports analysis world. Today, I have with me my co-host again, Staples, and I also have my two guests today, Brianna Ellis and Reinga Bloxham.
Hello.
Hello, how are we? Bri, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I can do. So I come from a dance background rather than a sport background for the most part. So finishing school, I went into a performance dance course in Aussie, and then I found anatomy and decided that I wanted to do PE. And then from there, I don't know how I ended up here. It just kind of became a follow-on effect of different papers at uni, different interest areas, different people being like, hey, that's cool. And then somehow I have a master's degree and I have a cool job. And yeah.
And so when you say it ended up here, where is here? So your role and what you're doing at the moment?
So I'm currently the performance analyst for the Steel. We have been, how many years is it now? 4.5, 5? Yeah, so
Wow.
1 season as an intern, 1 for my master's, and then 3 seasons post-masters running the show.
Yep.
Which is quite fun and it'll be a wee bit daunting from the start, but now that I'm fully into it, we're pretty good and we've got everything kind of sorted.
Before the Steel, did you have any other performance analysis work before you got into that role?
The postgrad diploma at Polytech, Te Pūkenga now, is very much placement based. So you have to do 100 hours of placement each semester. So I had placement with Staples at Elevate, placement with Otago Rugby, and then the placement with the Steel in the N&L team, which is under the Steel kind of bracket, which I ran in my intern year. So lots of intern placements, but after that, just stuff with Staples and then running the show over at Steel, because that's where I don't really like rugby. If anyone...
just put that out there now.
Let's just make it. Anyone that knows me knows that rugby is not something that I am interested in. And netball is definitely where I would rather be. So yeah, the progression from my master's into the job was just easy. That's essentially how I got it. No real interview needed.
And so when you were working in that rugby space in your postgrad, did you not like rugby before then, or is that what made you not like rugby?
After?
I've never really liked rugby.
Okay.
I don't see the point.
Maybe I've
run into
gotten
each
to
other.
it. Yeah.
It's not really, I prefer women's rugby. Women's rugby is way more interesting. When we had to code the FPC games in my intern year, that was fine. It was way more, how do you put it? It's not as aggressive tackling. It feels more strategic in a way. And I preferred that over the bombardment of tackle after tackle after tackle. And then just hitting each other that didn't interest me whatsoever.
Fair enough.
I'd rather the skill and the tactics and the fast play that netball has over the slow breakdown of rugby.
That's interesting. I've never worked with netball, but I love rugby. And when you were working with Staples, was that club stuff?
I
live
did
streams?
the individual codes for Tyree.
Ah, yes.
I think we won that year.
Yeah, you could be right.
Yeah, I think we won that year.
I love how you're claiming the we.
Hey,
God, I hate it. But come on.
you get a feeling very competitive. You get kind of a feeling of being a part of the team, even though they don't know you. Especially when you're coding them inside out, and individual coding is not something that I would do by choice. I wouldn't do it for rugby by choice ever again, just for the fact that you have to code every single action for every single player, and I think there was too many.
Pretty
teams
full on,
shared.
I quite enjoy individual coding. We're very opposite, me and you.
No, I would much rather go gameplay and see the game play out rather than rewind backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
Watch the same action 10,000 times to figure it out. No.
And
So
that's funny,
individual
even
coaching,
you talking about how you feel a part of the team in that small, even though you weren't in that environment, that's...
you get invested because you want them to do well.
Yeah.
And it was a hard season to get invested in this year, despite the fact that you're in amongst it. But yeah, you just get invested. You want that team to do well. You want to see them improve.
100%.
And that's the point of our job.
Mm-hmm.
That is the role. So yeah, if you don't care about them, then you're not doing your job properly, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you're there to help them do better and be that resource for them as well.
We're trying to improve their performance in a way to get greater outcomes. And if we don't care about that outcome, then we're not going to find the things we need to find to help them get there. So you've got to kind of care. And you've got to be invested enough to give them good feedback and good analysis to kind of help them improve.
Yep. And so we'll go to you, Reinga. We'll just get a little bit about you from your journey along the way with performance analysis.
Yeah, I think when you had contacted me, it made me think about how I entered the world of performance analysis, and I think I was assistant coach for the Steel at the time, and Janine Southby was the head coach, and we'd gone in, and I'd sort of come in partway through the season, so my role evolved as I emerged in the team. And I think we got to the first game, she thrust this iPad in front of me and she was like, I need to know when somebody's in the red. And I thought, what is she talking about? We hadn't kind of discussed that. And I was like, does she mean mentally, like on the court? Or but what she had was this iPad, and depending on the errors in possession that were made, they would change colours. So if somebody had the netball a lot of times and they were doing a good job of holding possession, they would obviously be green. If they made errors and gave the ball away, they would change from green to orange and then red.
Pretty straightforward when you explain it like that.
When you explain it like that, it did. I just thought, oh my God, I don't know what she's talking about. So as the game sort of went on, she said, is there anyone in the red? I remember thinking, I don't know. I am right now. And then, there was a couple of people, and it became, once I'd figured it out and we'd had a bit of a chat around it, it was quite easy, and it just sort of showed you what was happening on the court, and as a coach it just validated what you were thinking. That person has made a few more errors than maybe you thought, and yes, they're in the red, perhaps you might want to make a change, or you might want to coach them through that situation. So that was my first ever sort of intro into it. And, as a coach, I'd coached right from the age of, I was at high school when I started coaching, and I suppose you always analyse what's going on out on the court. You just don't have the technology that we do now. So you might have had a piece of paper with a couple of ticks and crosses, and, that's analysis as well. So, so when it sort of moved into the computer, and then another part of my role that year was to clip off.
Your favourite?
And so
I think it was. I can't remember what we used at the time. So I was given this iPad, and here you go. Could you clip some scenarios for us to watch at training? And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So that was a huge learning curve for me. And I think at the time Hayden Cross may have been helping the team. So he was there. Simon Jones was also there, so and then Janine said, they sort of like, this is how I do it, or blah, 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 and so that's how I learnt. I learnt by people showing me, and I'm a very visual learner anyway, so I sort of need to see things and do things to be able to start doing this. But again, I think when I started clipping, I used to think, well, I think this is useful, but is this useful to the players? Is it just one point of view? So it was kind of trial and error. A lot of it still is trial and error, and a lot of it is still based on what I think the team may need. So that was my introduction. Over the years, it has definitely evolved and grown, and I've had to spend time to be educated, just like the players, which has been great. So when we have new players coming in, it's always good to do like a little session on when we're using Huddle, like this is how you use Huddle, these are the reasons why you use Huddle. Staples was really good when he was in our group. We would have little sessions in this room or over there, and we would just spend half an hour to show players how to clip things and why we were clipping things, and then get them to talk about what they'd clipped and why they'd clipped it, and share it with the group. And so, there was a huge piece of education around that, and I think that's been the most important thing for me as a coach going forward, that I know that we need to do, because if you don't understand why you're doing something, then it's probably not worth doing. So over the years it's definitely grown, and the more that I have an understanding of what I need and what my team needs, then it sort of evolves and grows, and it's never the same, even though the sport is the same. The analysis side of things has definitely developed.
And when you say, just for the people that don't know, clipping.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain what that is?
Yes.
Do you want me to? You can
why
have a
don't
go.
I? And then these people will be like, oh, well, because I'm probably the most...
You do a lot of it.
Yeah, I know, but probably uneducated in this sense. I call it clipping. It's probably called something else. So clipping for me, what I would describe it as, so you might have a moment in a game that's been recorded that you just want to look at this little snippet in time or snippet or moment, and then you will cut that piece, and then you put it into a little playlist, and then I'm getting really good at it now. I can draw pictures, and I can have shapes and arrows, and then I've got comments, and I can tag people in. But at the start, it would pretty much just be like maybe a 7 to maybe a little bit longer second clip, and then I'd put it up, and then we'd talk about what I thought was happening in that moment. And then it would create a discussion around, right, okay, what are we seeing, and maybe what could we do next?
Cool. Is that how you would describe it?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, good. Pass.
Nailed.
How would an angles or... Because I've
there's
never,
just different terminology between softwares and things. So it's essentially the same thing as what we do when we say we're marking up or tagging. Or there's different. It's just software specific.
Because I did click onto it when we had that meeting the other day, but it took me a little bit to figure out clips. Because Nell and Aria have talked about clipping, but I've always been like...
Clipping is like probably more so used in Huddle more than anything else.
Yeah.
So you've not had any exposure to Huddle, so
I had
you wouldn't know that
I
term.
had that first year when we were doing that head impact study, but that was it. And it was, didn't use Huddle, we just used Sports Code, and now I've been using Angles for 2 seasons, so it's definitely a bit different.
You haven't been my intern.
We don't talk about that, do we? So that's cool. So that growth from when you first started to now, and how's that relationship with your analysts evolved, shall I say?
Yeah, look, massively important, because I think part of my role as a head coach is to understand my staff that I've got working with me and what it is they bring to the table, and what value they can add to our program. So I've had to upskill myself in this area, because it's obviously not an area of expertise, but I use it a lot now, and I know I can see the benefits that you can get from having really good, simple, because I'm a very simple person, simple clips and, data, stats, all that sort of stuff. I think there's lots of different things. So I think over the years we've had a few different people come work with us. A lot of the time we've had a lead analyst, and they've had interns around them, which is great, again, because it's growing the knowledge of our game and also growing somebody else's skills. And that's what you do as a coach, right? So they are potentially they're then coaching someone else underneath them or teaching them, same.
Yeah.
So it's developing other people around them. So I'm really big on that and having people involved. Like, I think there's nothing that we do that's top secret. It's just netball. Like, we're not doing anything outrageously different to any other team. So I think it's really important that over the years we've always had somebody who leads and then other people who sort of support them, which is great. Probably over the years, as I have grown into my coaching role, I've really figured out what it is that I need from each of the people around me. So sometimes I don't know what I need also, which is can be a lot of the time. And then people like Bree sort of fill in the gaps, and they might make suggestions of things that they've seen come up, like innovations and stuff like that. Or she might say, oh, do you think they might want to try this? This is what I've been trying to do. And she's really good at creating these really, I call them pretty.
I like
pretty,
things to look pretty.
Infographics and, different things. And she'll be like, what do you think about this? And I go, oh yeah, I think that's really cool. And then I always forget the other piece of the puzzle are the players. Like they're a really important piece of this puzzle. So just because I like it doesn't mean that the players do. So then she's really good at sort of checking in and making me accountable to see what are the players think about this, what are their needs. And she's also good at checking with the players around what is it that you think you need. I think when you've got senior players who've been in the group for a while, they kind of know what they need, or they think they may know, but it doesn't mean that you can't plant seeds with them and go, have you thought about doing it this way? So they're usually a little bit clear about what they need, and then the younger players will just go with whatever you tell them to do. And because it's like this information overload, right, and they're just kind of trying to stay afloat and go, oh my gosh, I've got to get my one clip in before 2 p.m. today, and I haven't done it yet, and what is that I'm going to do? But so you have varied levels of knowledge and understanding, and so making sure that you've got a good relationship with the people that you're working with is probably most important, that they've got a good understanding of what you need, and vice versa. I have a good understanding of what she needs. When you talk about timeliness and organisation, like this season sometimes we had double headers where you might have 2 games in one weekend. So we knew going into the weekend, right, we're going to need this on this day and then this on this following day, or we might just need it all together. So
they're the worst weeks.
They are definitely
they are the worst weeks.
But I think when Bree first started,
we had Super Sundays when I first started.
Yeah, you did. Do you want to explain what they are?
That's when everyone played in one venue on the same day. And then often you played another game that same weekend. So if a Super Sunday was in Invercargill, you'd have 3 games to film, because being the home team, you're responsible to film all of the end on. So you'd have to film all 3 of those games, and then we'd often have a Monday game. So you'd then have 4 games in 2 days to kind of have to do everything, and that was the worst. But double headers now are probably the worst bit, because that's 6 games for your scout analysis. Because my scouts, I don't know what other people do necessarily, but mine are always the last 3 games of the team we're playing, because that's the most current up-to-date data that we've got. There's no point looking at round 1 when we're playing them in round 12. So that's 3 games for each of those. So it ends up being 6 games, scrolling through 6 hours of footage. Thankfully, everything is coded out, so you can just kind of skip. But that's when time pressure definitely comes into it. When you're like, okay, they need it. They've got training Wednesday morning, so they need this by at least Wednesday-ish at night. And then the next game might be 24 hours after, and they don't have time to review. So you're like, do I give it to them the day before they're going to review, because they shouldn't necessarily be reviewing both teams at the same time before playing both teams, because then they're going to be focused on the next game, not the first game. So trying to figure out where the best places to put it are. And I think we've got it pretty sorted.
That's just having that relationship, and that understanding.
I don't think I even ask you anymore.
Kind of knowing when.
I think that's a good thing, because it means you've built trust. Which is a massive thing.
Do it, and it shows up in your email, and you're like, cool, great.
And there's not often, like, there might be a few times that I go, oh no, I don't need this, or Bree, could you get me this? And she's really great at doing that. And I think that, like you say, Staples has been built up over the years. When you were an intern, and I think the first trip that you went away with us was to Super Club in Nelson.
Super Club. Yep.
And so Super Club used to be 1 week of netball, which for ANZ you don't normally do that. Like it's like being at national champs. And Brie was fresh-faced and very excited, and she came away with us to Nelson, and it was really good, not only for us as a management group to build a relationship with her, but the players. So she got to see the players off the court. She got to see how they prepped for games, not just with the analysis side of things, but their physical, their nutrition, their sleep, all of that stuff. She got to live and breathe that for 1 whole week. Like, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly in those moments. And there was lots of time pressure in those situations because you have a game every day, and sometimes we were the last game at night, like 7:30 at night. I think it was 8:30 at night.
Yeah, they were late games.
And then you got
like a 9 o'clock the next day.
Yeah, so there was time pressure. There was all sorts of pressures, but the good thing was she had time with the players, and she had time with some of the senior players, and like Gina Crampton was in the team that year, and she was great at sitting down with Brie and going through some of the footage, and she would pull out structures, right? And she'd be like, Brie, this is a middle wide. And Brie was like, so that's, and so she then was introduced to the language behind what we were doing.
That's so handy for you.
Which gave her a deeper understanding then of the game, and then also of what we needed as a team, because then those players like Gina would be able to say, well, Brie, I don't need all this, but I'd like you to tell me which was the most successful centre pass structure that we did in this game. And so that was a new challenge in itself. And so Brie was like, oh my gosh, I've now got all these, structures that we used to have. And she would be able to go, she would almost, if it was really clear, and sometimes it was, she'd be going, this is this centre pass, this centre pass, this centre pass. And she could code that if that's what we wanted.
Yeah, that did evolve over the next couple of seasons where we did code our structures live.
Yeah.
And we tracked them all as we went, and if our wall wasn't working, then we would not do a wall, or you would look at it and go, okay, why is it not working, and talk about it. That structure stuff definitely came in quite well. We have removed it now.
Yes. Yes. And do you think for your understanding of the game, like, that was really important? Do you think it was important for you?
Definitely, because the structure is how we play.
That's great.
That's what you want.
Makes my job easier.
The structure is how we play everything. Everything is structured, and for the most part, to a certain degree. And if you don't know that structure, you're just watching netball and not actually understanding what it is. And I also coach netball, but I never coached to that point because I never coached to a level that they needed it. But now I had junior A's this year, and we went through them all. Like, they were doing walls, and they were doing it well. Like, it's helped in other areas. Like, now that I know that from my analysis area, I can put it into other things. And then I can help the new netballers coming through learn that earlier. I never got taught structures when I played netball.
I was about to ask that if you played netball. It was going through my head.
I played netball until year 10. I didn't play for the rest of high school. Dancing kind of took over. I dropped netball at the end of year 10. Never got taught what a wall was, never knew any centre pass structures, didn't know a single thing like that. And like, I was in the A team at school. Like, surely your A team, and even in year 9 and 10, should start looking at it. But I don't know if it was the time, because, I mean, that was a while ago now. I'd have to do the maths to figure it out. But whether that was actually something that coaches back then were even thinking about at that level, whereas now there's so many coaching courses, so many things to kind of build our coaches up and help our coaches be better coaches, that then in turn helps our players be better. So it definitely has helped in other areas, bringing that structure knowledge. And Gina was great, and Hoochie is always down for a performance conversation. Always has questions, always wants to know what's a better option.
An easier option?
Don't say that. You might watch it. No, we like Hoochie. It's all right. No, she will often. There was one that was like, my goal defense isn't recovering fast enough. How do I cover both players at once? And I was like, you can't.
Yeah.
You literally can't. There's no way. You could try cut them off, but you're going to have to just tell your goal defense to hurry the heck up. Because you cannot cover two people at once. You can try. What's more effective? I don't know. You'd have to try a few things and then we'll figure it out. But she's always down for a conversation.
Yeah. I think that's that relationship piece too, because, you know, part of Bree's job is to provide us with game stats, and they're always trying to catch her out. Like, the players are like, let's see if Bree's noticed this one, or let's throw this one in there. So they always try and keep her on her toes with that sort of stuff. But again, that's probably how we as a franchise and as a team have evolved how we use our analysis. Like, at the beginning, it was we were probably doing what somebody, I don't know, maybe the Silver Ferns were doing, because that's where you get most of your knowledge from. And then as we had worked out, right, we don't actually need that, let's declutter things, let's try and simplify it, and let's just pull out the pieces that we need. So we went to structures. And I think now, like, when Bree's working with, when she has students working with her, like some, like yourself, like she has all sorts of students with lots of different interests who may have never seen a game of netball before.
Most
so
of them
she
haven't.
could start talking about a wall and a 3-over and all this sort of stuff, and they're like, oh my God, she's loopy. So again, it's about simplifying things so that when they are helping her code, that they go, right, this is a centre pass, and it starts when that person hops in that little circle, when it finishes, when a ball goes through the hoop. So, you know, that's what I mean. Like, our game is actually quite simple. We're not doing anything that different. It's just how we use that information and how we have used the information over the years. We, Bree would work alongside our past strength and conditioning coach, Mikey Jacobs, who in himself, like, very, very creative, innovative, real deep thinker. And he was like, Bree, I've been thinking about this, and this is some of the GPS data I've got, and how do we link it to your analysis? And I'd be sitting there like, what's going on? But, you know,
the best conversations.
They'd have just some amazing conversations about how we take things to the next level.
Cool.
Yeah, so, and part of netball is playing in a team, right? Like, you cannot play this sport by yourself. You actually have to play with the connection of at least one or two other people. And so that's where these guys were going to. Like, we used to do lots of individual clipping. Sounds
don't
like
do any.
what rugby does. You know, and we'd have Bree, and Bree would have this playlist of every time she touched the ball. And when I first started, that's what the players would do with their self-reflections, and they'd have 20 clips of themselves, and they'd look great with their gear and their fake tan and their, you know, dress on. And now that's completely shifted for us as a team. Like, I do not like those anymore, because we need to focus on those connections and the unit work, and this is what we're doing as a unit. This is my role within that unit.
Yep.
But if I do my role and you do your job, then this is what success looks like for us as a unit or as a team. So we've really shifted to that space, and that was probably a big difference for me when I went to Wales recently. I opened up the Huddle account, and I opened it up, and I thought, oh my gosh, and there was one player who had like 56 individual clips, and I was like, I am not watching this. And this is before I'd even met these people, and so I watched them just so that I could kind of learn who this person was. But the thing was, this wasn't an anomaly. Like, there was, 16 people in our squad. They all had individual playlists of at least 30-something clips each, and I thought, right, how do I get them to shift to do things, the way I want them to? But I tried hard, and they did conform a little bit, but they still would have these individual playlists on the side, which is fine. Yeah. But in the group setting or in the team setting, we tried to make it more focused on what are we doing as a team or as a unit.
We do have a couple of girls that like individual clips.
Yeah, you still do.
But they're solely for themselves and for coaches. Yeah. Like, they're not presented at any point to anyone else. Generally, they're hidden. I can see everyone's clips, which is kind of funny because I did comment on someone's this year and they didn't realise I could see them. And she was like, I didn't know you could see these. I'm so sorry. I'm like, it's fine. I'm just letting you know that, like, these are good clips, but let's focus on other things. That was quite funny. we don't do any individual codes. Specifically, the only individual stats they'll get is shots. Only the shooters will get individual stats. And whether that's right or wrong,
I don't think there is an answer. Yeah, I don't think there is an answer. I think it's like the environment that you're in and what level the team's at. Because when I was working with Dunedin this year, I was coding the individual stats, but they were like, nah, like we don't need them. And we
if you're going to using rugby, if you're making X amount of tackles, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You have to put it into context, or like tackle success, or pass completion or something. In netball, like what does it actually mean if you don't get 100% pass?
And so with our one thing I did provide was our defensive stack on how many tackles were missed and made. Double shoulder contacts was a big one, so that was team efforts. But no, never anything. They can't see the individual stats, which I think it's beneficial because you're working as a team, eh?
Yeah, and like
there's always time.
Time
and place.
Like, skill set is really important. So if you know you've got a player who's got a deficit in some area of skill set,
and he's trying to address that in some way.
They're definitely going to look for that, and this is what it might look like in competition. This is what it might look like in a training, and this is what it looks like when we're actually practicing it. So they can see that they are still developing and learning, and you've got these tools at your hands that you can just use to help you do that, which is awesome.
Yeah, and like my master's was essentially on this topic around the perceptions of performance and how each player perceives their own performance in comparison to their statistics and what they actually did on court. And the biggest factor was how much time they've spent in an environment and how many environments they've spent time in.
Yeah.
So the greater their experience level, the better they were at perceiving their own performance. So there is an argument that those newer ones to our environment, maybe we should provide them with stuff at the start of the season, give them something to know, like track at the start. Maybe it's pre-season only. But yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I personally don't think they're entirely necessary in our environment. If someone asks me for them, then I can give them to them. But also Champion Data, which is an online website, has it all there anyway. So why should I spend time going through this game when I have very limited time on my hands when it's already there and they can go and look at it? It's open source, it's free, everyone can look at it. Why would I then have to go through the game myself and do it again when they can just go there?
I think we definitely had players this year who didn't even know that existed. And I thought, in my head, I was like, that's actually good because we've taken that focus on the individual and sort of put it back on the team. Then once they do know that that's there, then that's probably... And that was part of your challenge in your Masters, wasn't it?
They weren't allowed to look at it.
They had to come off the court and not look at the individual stats. And we had...
There would have been some that struggled with
players
that.
who I won't name who, they quite were really interested in that straight after. So they'd be like, don't forget, they'd be in the change room. Don't open your phone. Everyone, you need to do Bree's survey before you look at the live stats.
That's funny.
And the annoying thing about that year was that you guys were in Auckland for every single game. So I couldn't even be there. That was COVID year. Everything was centralised. I wasn't able to go anywhere. I didn't see anyone until I think I saw everyone in the first game and the last game, and that was about it. And I think the last game I didn't have enough data, so I went and took the iPad and gave it to every single person, and I was like, please fill this out. And someone was like, I don't know my code. And I was like, sounds like you haven't done anything across the entire season.
That's hard though, isn't it?
But yeah, like that season was difficult in terms of getting them to do stuff. And we didn't have a great season that year either.
No, we had a few injuries that year as well.
Yeah, so some of them definitely wanted to look at their stats a lot more that year.
Yeah.
And this year. Normally when we're doing badly, people like to know what they've done wrong.
Is it what they've done wrong or what they can do better? Like, I don't know,
That's really interesting because I know, like working with the Otago Spirit rugby team this year, I don't know if it's a gendered thing perhaps. Some of the girls, no matter how good they play, they're so critical of their performance. They could win by 50 points, but they're going, we should have done this better, we should have done this better. They never go and highlight what they did well. Do you find that as well?
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like the boys do that so much. I think they're happier to hype each other up.
We might need to take a leaf out of their book.
Maybe we need to bring some boys into the environment.
Maybe. I think from my experience, like even when you're doing a hot debrief after a game, the list of things of what we could do better is always easier to find than the list of things you've done well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if you've won by 20 points, it still seems to be that, oh, I could have done this better. It's so much easier for us to generate.
Yeah, it's really
There's
interesting.
always things to improve upon, and I think that's part of not being perfect. Like, no one is perfect.
Yeah.
Females generally, in my experience, are more, I would need to be perfect, I need to do this right, this has to happen.
I agree with that.
Just
More
like-
critical.
yeah, we're more
ourselves.
critical of ourselves, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I think it could go either way. But yeah, I definitely, the good things is definitely not as long as the let's fix this list. And sometimes the good things are so trivial. It's like, this person had a debut. It's like, is that really a good thing? Like, yes, great, they got on court, but like, we're not, yes, we can celebrate those things, but sometimes we need to focus on like the court as well. So like, it shouldn't all just be this person got 2 intercepts, this person got on court for the first time. Like, if all of our good things are that, then we're not looking at the full picture, because there are good things done on court.
That's right.
And there are bad things done on court, sometimes more bad things than good things, but
But I feel like it's
sport,
worth
isn't it?
celebrating those
Yeah.
small wins as well.
yeah. And why do we need to focus so much on the negative? We have to repeatedly do the good things.
We have to highlight them and acknowledge them to be
Yeah.
able to
Don't you-
repeat them.
Did you? I remember Aria now doing some highlight videos.
Yes, we used to do
yeah.
those. We dropped them this year.
Yes, just time constraint, budget, all those horrible words that you don't like.
Yeah.
But
The biggest
it was kind of thinking, what's the best use of our time
Yep.
here? But they were great. Like, I used to love watching the motivational. We used to call them motivational videos
Yeah.
because it is. It's
Gets
a highlight
everyone
reel
pumped
of
up.
all the great
Yeah.
things that happen out in that match or in that game or
Yeah.
in that training, and
And we link them to our values so that they're always connected to us rather than just the performance.
Yeah.
Because we are a team.
Yeah.
There are things that keep us as a team, and those are our values. So keeping everything back to that, are our values things we can talk about?
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. So our values, well, they were head, heart, and humble, but this year we changed them to head, heart, and hono. But using our head, thinking things through, being smart,
Yeah.
doing everything well when we do it, and not, that's pretty much how I would, just using our head,
Yeah.
essentially. And then our heart, putting the passion in, like going for ball, committing, but also like being good sports and like having a good time, actually having fun while playing. Like, yes, it's your job, but you can have fun and work at the same time. And connecting those things into our motivational packages were important to kind of keep the morale kind of high. And we did one this year. Or did we? We did a couple.
Yeah, I think we did a couple because I think this year we had
There was a few things.
we
this
had
season.
gold behaviours,
Yeah.
didn't we? I don't know. I can't even remember what it was linked to. Anyway,
Um,
we had gold
nuggets, golden
little
nuggets.
golden nuggets. Because it was a tough season. Like, when you lose every single game, you have to find little gold
Yeah.
nuggets in some of the things that you do. And that's that little piece about breaking it down into small goals and small wins. So, we'd break it down, and it might have been something as simple as getting to the circle edge or, a nice feed or something like that. And so Bri and her team had worked really hard to pull out some of those really good moments to remind the players, because when you're losing, it's very hard, or it's easier to remember all the horrible things that you may
Yep.
have done rather than all of the good things. And so there were definitely good moments, so it was good to see that some of those were celebrated, and then to just flip it and be quite positive around it. Right, this is what we were doing, so here are the good behaviours, but we just need to do them for longer, and that's how we become more competitive. And I think as a team, the good thing about this season, even though we lost every single game, was that we saw improvement in performance right to the last game of the season. Whereas last year, it was total opposite. We got to the end of the season and we sort of headed down the hill.
Yeah.
Whereas this year, we were still climbing up. So
Yeah, last year's season was interesting because round 6, half the team got COVID. And from round 6 onwards, it went down, and then it slowly started to build back up. So it was on a good trajectory before we all got COVID, and then it had to reset again. So that was a big part of, I guess, the trajectory of that season. COVID was not a friend that season for us.
I don't think it was anyone's
We didn't
friend.
get it at the right time, whereas a lot of other teams got it right at the start, whereas we were the last team to kind of get it. And you can't blame that. Like, the girls still have to put out a performance on court, but a lot of the trend, it was definitely around that COVID point where you saw it dip and then they slowly took their time to get back up.
I think that's really interesting about you saying how it's, even I find myself, obviously playing sport, you're always focusing on the negatives. I'm terrible for it. And it's not often I play hockey and we don't get every game filmed, but when you do, you watch it back and you're like, oh, like, that was actually good. But especially when I'm watching rugby or filming rugby, I come away and I'm like, oh, did they even play that great? And I've caught myself out a lot this season doing that. But then when you go back and you're coding it or you're looking at it, and especially I did Spirit highlight videos every weekend, and you're like, holy, there's actually so much. Like, I kept clicking things to highlight, and then it would be too long and I'd have to take heaps out. So I think it's just taking that step back, being able to go rewatch the game and look at it in a more positive headspace. That's kind of having that footage available to be able to go do that is really beneficial.
I think that goes back to, like you said at the start, when you got into the still role and you took on the analyst role, and previously they'd just been using pen and paper to that is notation analysis. That's effectively the same thing as what we're doing now, but linking it back to video. That's what you didn't have. You weren't able to go and, okay, you got your numbers, whatever, but then next day or that night, whenever, you can go back and rewatch and take the emotion out of the situation and actually objectively look at what happened. And that's one of the powerful things about video and integrating the video rather than just having a pen and paper. And that's a small evolution that it made, but it's quite powerful.
And it's the purpose of performance analysis. Like, the reason we are here is to provide objective information so that we're not using our bias to create decisions.
Yeah.
And bias is often from our emotions and how we feel at the time. So being able to review that in a more objective way with video and with the stats connected to that means that we're providing true data rather than just perceived performance, because our perceptions, like, what's the stat? The coaches can only remember like 20 to 40% of all the important events in the game. The one that's drilled into you in class every time. So like, you're not going to remember every single important event. You're not going to even remember the little unimportant ones. So having that context of the videos and having it linked to that stats is important. It gives us that data. It tells us what actually happened rather than what we think happened. So.
And I think as a coach, that's probably one of the good lessons I've learned over the years is that, you know, win or lose, now I can walk off the court and yes, I'll have emotion about, you know, the result of the game. But now I can go into the changing room, I can follow the process of what I know we should do for a debrief, regardless of the result. We can do a hot debrief, and then I know for myself, I then go home, I watch the footage, and then...
Do you watch it straight away?
I do, because otherwise I can't sleep.
Oh, really?
So win or lose, I go home and I make a cup of tea, and then I...
That's good to know.
Or if we're not at home, I just, you know, have my shower, jump into bed, I turn my computer on, and because Bree...
Should be online by then.
Yeah, she loads it
up.
It usually is, you know, and whether it's 1 o'clock in the morning or 3:30, I still do it.
Interesting.
So I'll just sit there and watch it. Sometimes, depending on how tired I am, I might get through half of it, but I do need to start watching it so that I can emotionally move on from that game, and then I can make sure that it becomes factual and not emotion. So that's part of the process that I've definitely learned that I need as a coach, so that I don't hold on to the emotions of the game, and then I can think about, right, what is my job as a coach? What are the key themes that have come out of this performance? What do we need to do in training, so that it's all factual rather than emotion? So, you know, and everyone like Bree, yourself, and probably Crofty have always talked about, you know, you need to make sure that you do watch it or part of it so that you can then move on. But yeah, over the years, I think that's become a really important tool for me as a coach to make sure that I do.
Funny that you watch it straight away.
Yeah.
I mean,
some people, I know some coaches, they like to go and have a good night's sleep and then watch it first thing in the morning.
No.
Come fresh to
I'll
it.
watch it. I will watch it, but I'll just watch it then. And sometimes I watch it as in, like, if it's if I'm at home, I watch it whatever's come on
Yep.
the telly, so I watch it as a spectator. But then I've got my notebook beside me and I'm scrolling down time, so I know, right, I'm going to clip that tomorrow. And then I'll have my clips, and then if I'm watching it on my laptop, then I'll just clip it and just
Yep.
put it in my playlist, so then the next day I've got things that I'll fire into myself or other coaches or to the players or whatever, or into our group list. So it's definitely been probably the biggest learning and biggest tool that I've used to help me process it all.
That's something that we probably could have improved a bit in the space of the girls. They didn't really watch the game until maybe 3 or 4 days later, mostly because the next day is generally either travel and then a rest day. But having that potentially done earlier could be more beneficial because
Yeah, I feel like travel can be a bit of an excuse because, like you say, it's usually all online. So there's, coming from the rugby experiences, boys will jump on the plane and they'll download it locally and watch it on the plane.
And
so
that's Huddle, you can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Huddle on the iPad, like you did that a lot over that season. You were centralised in Auckland. You would download it on the iPad and have it in the like on the plane because you had the chartered flights and stuff like that. But yeah, that terminal review means we can move past it faster, and especially this season, like perhaps that was something that we could have done better, was try push that review a bit closer so we got over it faster, especially towards the end of, as we kind of built up. Maybe they didn't want to watch it because they didn't want to see how
Could be an
bad
element of that,
was.
100%, yeah.
But yeah, maybe that faster review is something that we could look at changing.
I think there's still a lot of players who like to watch whatever's coming through the TV. They still like to watch it that way.
Yep.
And then the clipping, they definitely see as homework. Like it's like,
Yeah.
right, our homework has to be in by 2 p.m. on this day. And, and I'm sitting there going, I'd like to review some clips, and then, half an hour before it's due and bam, they all come in. So there's still a little element of that, but it definitely has improved, and we've tried to simplify things like, when you ask a player, right, you can only put one clip into the playlist, and like you can see some of them stressing about only one clip. What about my 17 others that I've got lined up here? But
Make it a good one.
But as the season went on, they just became so much better at doing it, and then so much more confident at then delivering that to their teammates. Their clip would come up on the big screen. They were like, "Oh yeah, that's me. Oh, this is what I was saying," and then they'd have a little discussion. Right, what does that mean for us as the bigger picture? I think the Welsh feathers have got a little bit of learning to do.
Yeah, right.
One clip turn into, and I'd go in and I'd be like, "Who put 7 clips in this playlist?"
Our defenders need to learn how to shut up sometimes as well.
Yeah, our defence love a chat.
They love a good conversation.
Talking of clips, though, it's probably a learned skill being able to watch yourself as well.
Yeah.
So someone learning to watch themselves and learning to clip themselves, doing every involvement's probably going to be easier than finding that one.
But at the
or
same
one or
time,
two
they don't
that's
have to
really-
clip themselves.
Just being able to watch the game and be a little bit more analytical when they watch it as well. Do you know if much is done in the development space at that level to teach the players how to?
We actually had quite a good discussion about that, because us in the Steel team, so we were trying to focus on unit, and then because Brie obviously sees everything, but I'm also linked to the NNL page, so then I get all these notifications, and Brie has added 7 clips, and I'm like, 7 clips? What is going on here? So I always go in and I'm watching, and so they're still learning and developing actually how to clip, and a lot of their clips are individual focus, so that's where our Steel team and our Blast team could get a little bit more alignment, because we have players coming up and down and sliding in both teams, and I just think if we can take that focus away from the individual as such, and then focus on, right, these are the structures this is what tactically what we've been trying to do this week at training. Can we find moments where we've done this really well and where it hasn't quite come off, and then what is the next piece of the puzzle, and how do we try and, what is the skill set, what is the next move for us to try and improve that area?
Yeah, I think NNL utilise it enough. They don't want to go less. They probably don't want to go too much more. They just need to refine it. But in terms of below that NNL space, there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's no analysis in our club systems. There's nothing in that Steel Steps Accelerator group.
No.
There's nothing ahead of that NNL. So their first exposure is when they're on the national level of NNL. So
it's a little bit daunting, isn't it, as well, like for some of them, because like you say, it's their first time, and then here's this playlist, and if you click on your name, it's every time you might touch the ball,
Could be a bit intimidating to start with.
Oh,
couldn't it?
massively. And even the first time that they even are playing in the games televised, like, there's all that emotion and anxiety that goes around that, and it's like, oh, does my hair look good in my shoes?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got my
Is my
socks
tan
on.
perfect?
Yeah, tan, okay.
Who's watching?
who's
Granddad's all the
watching
way in another city watching on TV.
And
that could be in the back of your mind.
That's quite a big difference from, I suppose, the rugby industry in Dunedin. They're lucky they've got you because you do a lot of the club rugby and school stuff, and so they're getting exposed to it earlier on. And when we talked with Spence and Fabian about it, and how coming through, they already are kind of used to having that analysis and a bit more of an understanding of how they can use
I guess
it.
rugby nationally has adopted it far earlier.
Yeah.
Like Fabian came through Christchurch Boys High School, wasn't it? And he
And
was
they-
exposed to it there.
And that's
So
at
then-
school level.
Yeah.
Like
I
I think
that's
some of our school teams are, they might go live in a game, so it's actually there. So kids are now
able to
able to
watch.
start watching
Yeah.
themselves. I suppose if you've got some hard out mum, me, who might like pull out their phone and take some little clips and be
Sean
like,
Mariah loves it.
want some feedback here? And send some little clips through with some little notes.
That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it potentially is trickling in, but probably isn't as deep as some other sports at the moment.
Yeah, there's definitely barriers in place where club netball is very much...
I don't think netball's unique in that sense either. There's
No,
plenty of sports
there's
that,
definitely
like,
so many
not.
sports.
But in terms of like Edgar Centre, some courts have good viewing, other courts don't. Just the money and the time and those big things that no sport really ever has. But also there's people that don't want that or don't see the value in that, and it's trying to get their buy-in as well. But that's the difficult part, because a lot of people involved in netball are very traditional and don't want to see too much change and want to keep it very much pen and paper.
So when you say those people don't see the value, what values do you think?
What values performance analysis and
yeah.
video in general? Well, video allows us to kind of actually see what's going on. When you're on the court, you don't see everything. You're only seeing it from your own perspective rather than what's happening from behind you or in front of you as a big picture. Video just means you have context of what's going on. Everything's recorded. We can go and look and be like, okay, did this work? Did this not work? What did I do well? What did I need to improve on? Are we working together? Are we not working together? It's evidence, I guess. And
Doesn't lie.
No, it doesn't lie.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. Like, evidence is great, especially win or lose. You can say, actually, it doesn't matter how you're feeling right now. These are the facts.
Yep.
And as a coach, you've got them to support what you're saying as well.
And we have those, like you have those on hand straight away. We have them during the game. We have them at quarter breaks. So as a coach, you might be watching the game and think, you might have a feeling that something is happening, and then you might check the information and you go, yep,
Yeah.
confirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it helps you make decisions during the game. It can also help the players. Like, we have, again, different varied levels of what players need when they come on and off the court. But, over the years we've had some really experienced players who will ask, how many times has Brie got this ball? I need to know because I'm feeling like it's happening lots of times, is it? And you're like, yep. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm not really doing my job properly there or whatever. So, I think it just provides the facts, and this is it. There's no hiding behind it.
Yep.
That's what it is.
And it's a learning tool. It's feedback.
Yep.
And feedback is how we learn, and without it, you don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
So without feedback, we're not going to improve, we're not going to progress. And most people want to get better at things. No one wants to be
Development.
stuck in the status quo. Even if they're not going to be a professional athlete, they still want to improve, they still want to perform better. They're still critical of themselves, but having evidence means we can learn something. We can go back and look at it and be like, oh, I used to do this, now I do that. That's so much better. They can see progress. Video is just the key. Even if they're not getting stats off the video, having the video is important. We can't do stats on a game if we don't have video.
Yeah.
The video is our context. If I wanted to do stats on a game 2 days later, I couldn't do it unless I had the video. So you either have to do it then and now, or you can do it later with evidence. So I think in the club setting, it doesn't necessarily need to be used in terms of analysis as the general term and coding, taking stats. It just needs to be introduced as a way for them to reflect, for them to look at and figure out what's going wrong, what's going right, and then the coaches to provide feedback in a way that they can visually see it.
Yeah.
Because you might tell me I'm not covering my player enough on circle edge or something, but you don't know what that means until you actually look at it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think you might do something, but you're actually not until it's shown to you right in front of your face.
Yeah.
So even if it's not stats, I think it's still valuable in that club space. And then in that still steps accelerator program kind of spot, you can then add a little bit more into like, how do we look at the video and kind of learning that far.
How about the coaches as well? They're not just the players. Like, are the coaches learning to use the video? So, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of coaches around that have ambitions to make a career out of coaching. This is now a fundamental element of the coaching process. Is there much? Can we do more in that space to educate the coaches?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And I think any coach who is serious about improving and developing themselves as a coach would be open to being educated around this space, right? And like you say, like the video is such a great tool now for players, but as coaches, this is what because you often like, I'm terrible. I don't even know what I had for breakfast this morning. So how do you know what's happened in a game? You know, so to be able to watch that back and then go, well, actually that wasn't quite the way that I thought we were going to be able to do it. What do I need to do as a coach to make sure that next time we can improve in that area?
Do you think from the bench it takes a little bit of pressure off you, going, I don't need to remember everything that happened because I can watch it back before I go to bed?
Yeah, sometimes.
Obviously, you want to remember the key things, and like, you're going to be
yeah.
there, and you need to coach through the game. But you're going, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I know I've got that to fall back on. Do you think it takes the pressure off a wee bit?
Oh, look, I definitely think, I don't know if it takes the pressure off, but it's like you say, it's a tool. And I always have a book with pen and paper, and there are moments where I'll just go, oh yeah, that's the time, and I write it down in that quarter, and I know. So the next day, because I don't remember, and then the next day when I open my book up and I was like, what did I write down 8 minutes 52 for? And then I have a look and I go, oh, that happened, okay. And I look at it and I think, actually, that's not even a moment. But in the moment, it feels like
full of emotion.
Yes. And then I go, that's nothing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might not be around my players or my coaching. It could be around the officials, like the umpires, something that a call that I may not agree with. And then when I watch it, I go, nah, it's actually nothing. Move on.
But if it is, that's still valuable in itself.
Yes. And again, another tool that you can use to reflect.
Yep.
With the umpires now, that's a different part of our game that we can send in clips and have a discussion around what they were seeing and what was happening.
And what their ruling is and what they've seen.
Yeah.
But even in the umpire space, there's a lot they could do in that analysis area. They could have an analyst working with them
I haven't even thought about
full-time.
that before.
I've spoken to a couple of our umpires down here in terms of like, do they want the video after we have a preseason game? And they're always like, yes, please. I want to know where I'm standing. I want to know if I'm in the right line, if I've missed anything, what if my calls are accurate. This is an untapped area that perhaps isn't getting covered. I'm not sure entirely what they get, but they used to just get individual codes from the players. Oh. So they'd get the champion data codes that we used to get. And yet that doesn't tell them anything about their performance. No. It only tells them what each player did at each time.
And they get a lot of stick, don't they?
They do.
So, but they don't have access
again,
to that all the time to what they're doing.
One moment in the game, like you could have an absolute amazing game if you looked at the stats and win or lose by one goal, but your stats have been the best that they've been all season, and then all of a sudden you think, oh no, we haven't played well. But actually, when you look at the data, you've played better than you have all year.
Yep.
You just lost the game in the last 2 seconds of the game. Yeah, so there's always those moments as well.
There was a couple of those
it is.
this year. Those ones that were so close. But just
No, that's interesting you say about the umpires. I've just been away on the under-15 tournament in Alex, and Jeff brought us along last year, 4 of us, to do some filming capture for each team. So they have one game filmed and a wee sheet of kind of some stats from the game, some percentages and all that. And they're young, but like the fact that they're getting that is cool and they love it. But we go away with the referees, and it was in the final and there was a try, but all the parents on the side were like, "No, that's not a try." But we're up here live coding, reversed it at half time, and like, yeah, refs made the right call. So even then, and they asked for footage on the nights, like, can we look at what happened in this game? And I suppose the senior referees were also wanting to look at the junior referees up and coming. So I've never thought about it in that way, but that is...
Yeah, we get requests every week.
Yeah, development tool for them as well.
Yeah, the New Zealand referees, the domestic squad are always looking at the referees around here, so they're always asking for footage. It's huge.
Yeah, it's definitely an area that we've developed in the last couple of years. Like it's part of the review process for umpires as well. Like you have to a certain day that you can send in some clips to the umpire coaches and the convener. And then, but again, same thing as the players. You can't send in 52 clips of one moment. You know, it has to be around a theme of something that you thought may have been happening. And obviously, usually I always think if you're sending in clips, something's gone bad and you haven't agreed with it. So then you might have the odd clip where you might put that in and go, what were you seeing here? Because what I saw wasn't actually, you know, we're not seeing the same thing, or the interpretation's a little bit different.
So it allows a bit more transparency in that regard, doesn't it?
Yeah, and again, the umpires want to improve and they want to be better, right? So then it opens up that dialogue and that discussion, and then you can chat through. And then as a coach, I always think, right, if that's what they're seeing and they're the person who's going to be officiating this game and that's going to be what's happening every week, I need to do something different here. Because if we do the same thing, we're going to get the same result. So again, there's that sort of, you know, you're both learning from that one situation. I always ask them, one of the first questions I ask the umpires after the game is, have you got any feedback for us? And they always go, oh, do you really want to hear? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I need to know what you think overall as a theme that we could maybe improve on. So it doesn't always have to be one-sided. Like I don't always have to go, I didn't like how you made that call. And that's why we lost. Yeah, so I always think, you know, and I say to them, you could send some clips to us. And they're like, oh, do you really want us? And I'm like, oh, I don't know.
You can see the benefit of that, though, 100%. Yeah.
And that's having those different viewpoints for you as a coach as well, like having Bri and having that close relationship. She's going to look at things probably a little bit differently to you. And I think that's another important aspect as an analyst, is I came into it, and I've said this a couple of times before, but I was worried about my knowledge of rugby. And like I knew rugby, but you don't know it if you haven't played it that well. Like I was like, well, all the calls, like you said before, when you first came into that environment, some of the calls in rugby or the moves, I'm like, what does that mean? And that's really cool to hear the environment you went in and getting sat down and being taught through things. Is because at the start I just had to learn myself, and this year was way better. Steve, when I was working with the forwards, I got to sit there and he would actually talk through some line-out moves, and I got to know that. And I think then you have a different picture of the game. Like I still watch it and I see things that maybe the coaches may see differently because they're so focused on their season and things. But as an outsider, it's important to have that. But then that confidence to be able to go up to a coach and be like, hey, this is what I saw, is also a big thing that I think I'm still working on, is being confident in my knowledge. But I think that comes with experience, and I suppose you have that now working with the team for so many years.
It's still hard though. Like there are some things that people ask a question and I'm like, you're the expert, not me. Like I'm learning off the players as much as the players are learning off me. And it used to be that I learned more off the players than they ever did from me. But now it's a little bit more reciprocal if they say something and I'm like, oh, I didn't really know that. Or they might create a new centre pass structure and I'm like, guys, you have not told me what this is. Please draw it for me. And I mean, yeah, you're always going to learn something off a coach, off a player. You don't know everything. They don't know everything. No one knows absolutely everything that could possibly be about netball. If you did well, you can probably coach every team in the world, and like, you're always going to learn. Your experience is always going to help you learn something new. You're never going to know everything. So that's why a lot of the time in sport people say volunteer, because the more you experience, the more you're going to learn, the more people you're going to learn from, and that then creates a bigger net of knowledge that you can
and
draw
opportunities as well.
Yeah.
Just the last 2 years I've learned so much, and I think I still can, and even this podcast, like just from talking to you guys today, learning new things. And I think that is why I've started this podcast. In my first year, I didn't really even know what performance analysis was, and I've said this to you before, but I think just having that base knowledge about why, I think the why is a big thing for me, like why we do it, what the benefits are, and you guys have spoken about them a lot today.
The person that taught me about why was Mikey. One time I sent, I think it might have been a fortnightly report, and I like wrote a wee thing about what I'd seen, and then he was like, "That's cool, Brie, but why does it matter?" And I was like, I guess, yeah, you're right. Why does this matter? Why is any of this information important? What can we do with it? Why do I need to tell people this? And I think that might have been like maybe my second year out, and I was like, no one's ever asked me why before. So yeah, why is the biggest thing. Why does that stat matter? Is it meaningful? Are we going to make any changes from it? Why is performance analysis important? All of those why questions are the most important ones to know and to be able to phrase. If one of the girls comes up and has a question, I'm like, why do you want to know that? What difference is that going to make? Or they might come up and be like, why does this happen? Or why does this stat say this? And being able to explain what a stat is and what it means and how we can then use that is important. So always trying to think of your why, not your personal why, but that's important too. But the why about everything, why is that important? Why do we need it?
Yeah, because you can give someone a stat and they can be like, cool.
Yeah. Why
What
do I
can I
need
do
to
with
know how
this?
many shots I missed?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you need to know because you can go back and look at it and see, did I not set my shot properly? Did I stand in an awkward position? Was there something going on? Was it the last second before the whistle was about to go? Why was that shot missed in the first place? But why did we need to know that stat? Well, because if you don't score goals, we don't win.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest answer, but there's so many little whys underneath it. So yeah, always hunt for the whys. That's definitely
Throughout your time in the industry, what have been some challenges with, I suppose you're learning along the way, but what have been some challenges with trying to get people to understand? Have you had any challenges?
I think because most of my experience has been with the steel, the biggest challenge would just be how our environment is set up. It's not necessarily performance analysis like an issue in that. The biggest challenge is that we are split. We're split into different centres, and that makes things slightly difficult. That's the only big challenge, really.
Difficult
the
in what
players
way?
are pretty difficult in the fact that I don't see the team.
Yeah.
Very rarely with the team. I think last season, I think I saw you at home games and that's about it. We didn't train in Dunedin this year, so I didn't see any trainings. We don't really film trainings anyway, unless I'm there, which is very infrequent. So you kind of lose that connection and that knowledge of what's going on, and that's where your relationship with the coach has to come in. Being like, what have you done this week?
Yeah.
Or you look at all of the things that get sent through in the group chat, all of the what next and what did we do wells. that's where you learn what they've done that week, if things aren't going well. That's the biggest challenge in terms of our environment from my perspective. It's just that, not lack of connection, because it's definitely always connection, but that challenge of being so
lack
far
of
away.
involvement
But
in person.
for the most part, the girls are always pretty open to new things. They've never really challenged anything too drastically. There's definitely a few questions of like, how is this calculated? What does this mean?
Yep.
And then as long as you have the answer,
Yep.
it's fine. Things like turnovers.
Yeah, turnovers are always a little.
Turnovers are the biggest.
It's down to interpretation. They're like, Bree said we did this and it's not right. And I'm
Or
like,
they called this a loss, but I think it's a gain. And I'm like, well, it's not. Do you
How many
technically?
conversations do we have about that?
Well, it all comes down to your
many
definition. Yeah, sometimes the girls are like, that's a gain. We gained the position. I'm like, yeah, but they did something wrong, so it's a loss. So it just depends on how you define the things. But
And
yeah,
I think those conversations are great for the
They
players
are.
because then that's a deeper understanding of
Yeah.
how's that coded and why is it like that and what does that mean for us and how do we use it.
Yeah.
And I think Bree's wrong. Let's prove her. Let's prove her.
It's
If
cool
They,
that-
they
yeah.
just get a sniff of trying to prove Bree wrong. It's like this big
if I
show,
have
you know.
one typo or like there's quite a few typos in my scout reports, to be fair, because I'm generally doing them quite late at night. Especially this season, because I was working full time doing something else and working still on the side. So a lot of the scout reports were done at like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And yet typos are quite common. But sometimes the stats are wrong or they don't add up. Or like, I don't check them every time. And a big part of my work is the interns. And the interns do run a lot of the match stuff because that's their job.
Yep.
My role, technically, is as a teaching assistant rather than as an analyst. So as much as I say I'm the head analyst for the Steel, it's technically not the job title. I'm not employed by the Steel, I'm employed by Te Pukenga and the Otago Polytech. So my job is to help the students rather than to do the work myself. So
That comes with its own challenges.
yeah,
as well,
that comes with a lot of challenge, and especially at the start of the season when you've got people that have no idea how to use the software, and you're like, okay, there's a game this weekend, they don't know what to do, how am I going to do this? It has to be accurate, it has to be on time. Like, I think the first 3 or 4 games, I made them recode the entire game straight after the game happened. Because I was like, that's not quite good enough, guys, like, we need to do this again. And yeah, it comes with its challenges, but I often don't read the reports before I send them to you.
Good to know.
Like, in terms of the match reports, like, I know what the stats are because I've looked at them, but I've not, like, I generally, by the end of the season, I trust that they have learned enough from the start to have it right. And then sometimes I'll get a text being like, that doesn't add up. And I'm like, oh, damn it, I have to go fix that. But that's the biggest thing is I shouldn't have to do the work by the end of the season if I've taught my interns how to do it properly. And that's the biggest thing for me is I had 2 interns with me the whole time this year and then a couple of others helping out. By the end of the season, I didn't really need to tell them what to do. I didn't need to check their work. I could just be like, hey, go do this for me. And there wouldn't be really too many mistakes. Like, there'd be a couple little things, but they're things that are easy fixes or they've not had made that mistake before, so now they're learning something new. So there's always, if I'm not doing my job properly, then why am I doing my job? The whole job is to teach them, so they should know by the end of the season how to do it.
I think that sort of flows into our environment as well because at the start of the season we talk about, right, let's set up a structure of what it's going to look like for the week. Here's on, Monday we might do this, on Tuesday we might do that. By this day we're going to do a scout report, then we're going to have our match stats. So we have that routine. And so, we had a really good, strong group of players who were really proficient in this analysis area this year, and they just were great at going, right, this is what I think we might need. And I was like, this is how we normally do it. And they were like, yep, I agree with that. Okay, can you just put a reminder out every Tuesday that our clips have to be done, and as long as everyone's got them. And so at the beginning, I'd put this little reminder out. But then, as you grow into the season, and even with all the pressure and the stresses, it just becomes part of your weekly routine, and they know.
Homework's due.
Yeah, gee, don't forget, your clips have to be in today, and they have to be done by this day. And then the players took more ownership in that space this year. They would even lead the scout report. So Bree would always do a scout report of, we're playing Otago next, and here are some of the stats around their last 3 games. And she'd always write a little blurb about some of the things that, we'd noticed in the past or that come up. But the challenge this year was that one person had to deliver that each week, and they did that quite differently, and it was really...
I'm sad I didn't get to see.
I know, and it's a bit of... there was some really good ones. Like one day they had, I think one of the players had set up a quiz, an online quiz, and so everyone had to log on their phones, and a question will pop up. How many times has Staple missed a goal in this quarter? And then they'd be on their phones, and just that little bit of competition.
That's
it just
cool.
Changed the scout a little bit. So feeding into all of that was all the data that they needed to know about who we were playing. But then there was this competition piece, and then there was this element of fun. So, and a different voice. Like, they do not want to hear my voice.
I was just about to say that.
Or mine. We play each team 3 times. The scout reports can only be so different.
And as a player sitting there and someone's just, I suppose, listing off numbers and percentages and this is what they do, sitting there and you're just like, okay. But that's cool. That's
Thinking
cool.
about what
And I think it's cool how involved the players are with the analysis side of things, like having to do stuff for them.
Yeah.
How does that compare to your experience with Dunedin?
Well, some of the players I know use it and watch it, but not a lot of them do anything like create playlists or anything. They just watch it, and then the coaches are really good at bringing things, but they don't pressure them to bring things. It's like, did you watch the footage? Hands up. Most of the time are down. There was a big increase and improvement this year. So many more players were using it, and even in the coaching environment, it was used a lot more, which was cool to see. But that's a cool environment. There is getting the players to actually be accountable for it and bring it and know what they need to know.
And that's the difference. Like, I wouldn't say we're completely player-led. We're definitely coach-led, but with a lot of player input. And I think that makes it more well-rounded of an environment. I don't like the idea of someone just standing there and lecturing you of what you need to do. The players don't always learn that way. And, I can only make scouts so different each time, especially if we play this team 2 weeks in a row and you're like, I can't tell you much more, I'm sorry.
Copy and paste.
You try not to write the same thing, but you're just trying to rephrase what you've written the time before. Sometimes there's new things, but if you know that team well enough, if you've watched enough games, it's generally pretty obvious what has changed and what hasn't.
I think there's definitely growth in that area, like within Dunedin. They'll get in there, the mini teams, and talk about, I suppose, what some things that, like, especially more with preview, like what have the other team done, so they have to go watch the game. It's developing, definitely, but I think there's still that whole, I don't really want to go home and watch the game at like homework. I think there's still
if you're
that.
watching someone else's game. If you're watching another team's game, it's kind of like, I don't really want to watch them. It's not me.
Oh, I don't know. I feel like it's different for different players. There'll be, like,
There's definitely
all
some
sorts of-
standout players, who are like, right, I know this, and this about this team, and they stand out at training. They come, the coaches ask them, right, what have you seen? And the same people put their hands up because they've actually done the homework. But there's some people who just won't even do it.
And that's also a bonus in terms of rugby. The club teams often have players that play in NPC.
Yeah.
So they've had that higher performance environment to kind of build off, and they want to know, and they want to defeat that team, and they want to win. Whereas some of those players don't really care as much. They're just there to play rugby, and they're there to have a good time. Even though they're in that top team, like sometimes they're still just there to play rugby.
That's it.
So I guess in our environment, in terms of like, they're all professionals, they all have to do the job.
Yeah.
And that's part of their job. Whereas in club rugby, it's kind of an
so
option.
different. Yeah.
They're not getting paid to be
No.
there. I think they probably wish they were being paid to be there. It's definitely one of those things of, it's their job, they have to do it. if they want to improve and they want to win.
I think that's also, I've been across a few environments this year, like the club rugby and then Spirit and also Otago. And there's that level of, I suppose, Otago, it's their job. And they do their homework. That is their job. But
I think even in that environment, though, you have your leaders.
There'll be the
certain
leaders
that will take it on and others that will sit back
Yeah.
and sort of observe and not be too involved in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely had a few this year. Probably some of the newer girls that hadn't really been exposed to it were definitely more followers rather than jump in and do it themselves. But it definitely grew towards the end of the season. Some of them would, after a couple of, hey, you need to do this, like, this is important. I think they finally kind of got there. And then this season they will get pushed a wee bit harder at the start. But yeah, I think they get there.
I think it's once they understand how to use it and why they
have to have buy-in.
Yeah.
And like,
Ask the why.
it's the
Yeah.
why.
the why.
Yeah.
Of it. And
Yeah.
once they link those pieces together, they're like, oh, you can see what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it's the professional habits
Yeah.
as well, which you have to train yourself to do. It's not necessarily something that comes completely naturally to everyone. Yeah, definitely different, I think, in that club space.
Yeah.
You can only really take it one step at a time.
Yes.
For them, you can't introduce everything all at once because they'll be like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
It's too much effort for my social rugby.
Yeah. Talking about that environment, then moving forward, how do you see the analysis industry evolving in the netball space?
I would like it to be better resourced and funded.
Don't we all?
I think that's across the board.
Well, when you look at the rugby space, you look at the likes of the Highlanders or the Chiefs and the Crusaders, like, they'll have a head analyst, an assistant analyst. Some of them will have apprentices. Some of them will have 2 assistants. Then they'll have a group of interns. And those interns are working 40 hours on top of the 40 hours that all the paid staff are working. I'm contracted for 15, 20, I can't remember, hours a week. That's very little. And it's only in season. So when rugby have contracts that are full time for 40 hours a week, they can get a hell of a lot more done. And I think my advantage is because of our kind of relationship with Te Pukenga and the Otago Polytech is that a lot of the work I don't have to do. I have students that are there to learn and do need that time on the gear to learn. So a lot of the opposition games, I won't code them, the students will code them. Whereas in the other environments, they don't have that access.
Yes.
So we have to share a lot of our information. We share codes to all of the teams at the end of every game. We share footage to the teams at the end of every game. I know in Australia, I was talking to Maddie, who's the Swifts analyst. When the Swifts came down to us at the pre-season, I was talking to her prior, and she was like, we have to travel to every single game because they don't provide us footage.
Well,
So they are very much secretive in that footage space. They don't share anything. They don't want to share anything.
Even footage.
Yeah, they don't share footage.
That's bizarre.
Yeah. So in our environments, we share end-on footage and Sky. Everyone gets access to it. The home team's responsible for uploading, and then the home team's also responsible for sharing a base code. That means that every team has a code. They don't have to code every game themselves because it's 15 rounds of 3 games around.
yeah.
Like, there's a lot of netball, and each game's an hour. I mean, I can code a game in about 45 minutes if I'm doing it super fast. But you don't want to spend that much time coding every single game every week and then have to scout and do everything else. So definitely have a luxury of the fact we have students. It's definitely a plus of our relationship, but that comes with other problems when you have to train people up every year and you're constantly replacing people, and then some people aren't interested, they want to do other things, you don't get the student numbers. There's always wee challenges that come along the way, but we do have the bonus of other people help us out and we help each other out. If I had it my way, it'd be nice to be full-time in season. There's so many things we could do and we don't have time to do it. We've got quite a few things in our back pocket. that we've talked about and created or trialed, but we haven't been able to bring it out because we don't have time.
Yeah.
This season was not a season to start anything new. As much as we had things ready to go and we were going to introduce them, after the first couple of games, it was kind of evident we didn't need to bring anything else into the environment, that overcomplicating was not going to help us at all. Sometimes too much information is bad.
Over-analysing things as well.
Yeah, but things like looking more in a complex systems approach, which is the way that performance analysis is technically heading, but in the netball space that's quite difficult in terms of, especially in New Zealand, no one's full-time, no one has that full knowledge base yet. It seems that without the time, we're not going to improve because you're limited so much what you can do in that time. So you can't get more time without more money. So kind of that's where the biggest challenge kind of lies at the moment. But also netball in general is always going to be slightly less funded than rugby. So you kind of just have to make do with what you've got, and the best thing to do is utilise everything you can get in the right way, be as efficient as possible.
That's when it comes down to your workflows and processes to make the most of the time you do have, but then that comes with resource requirements as well.
I think that's where our innovation lies, because we aren't as well resourced as we want to be. So we have to be really creative with, right, this is the amount of time we've got. What is the best bang for our buck here? What do I need? What are the priorities? What can I simplify? What can I absolutely get rid of? And how is this going to help us move forward? But, in an ideal world, I'd love to have a full-time. I'd love to have all full-time staff.
Exactly.
Because then you'd have so much more time to be able to discuss things and go deeper in all areas, to think, right, and we've had discussions around, do you think we could try this and try that, and quite specific to netball, looking at skill set and pairings and connections and that sort of stuff, and how could we use that with Huddle, and how can we use that with our data analysis and all this other sort of stuff. So I think, in an ideal world, we would be able to probably try out a few different things, but
it's
our
all
reality
banked in
is
here for a
quite
PhD.
different. So we
right.
just have to be, I say we're innovative because we have to be, because we know, right, we've only got this limited amount of time.
How can we best use that?
And a lot of those topics that we have talked about are all things that I would like to pursue in research terms, but it's having the time, but also being able to do it in season at the same time as doing everything else is just, but also there's no money in studying sometimes. Studied too long, I don't really need to study anymore, but doing a PhD in the likes of momentum and synergy and those couplings of players is something that I'm really interested in, but it's where do you find the time when you're trying to do it in season and you want it to be done in season at the same time so you can evaluate it as you go. But
so it'll be research, but you want it to be functional as well, don't you?
But then you need someone else to be able to do everything else you've already done. So you kind of need two people to be able to do it, because you can't do that and do your regular analysis at the same time. It's just too much. So definitely time. Time is nice. But
time and money.
That's probably they're the biggest two things. I think that's any sport will argue that time and money are the most valuable resources.
With Brie in your environment, with her how she's developed over the seasons, do you almost see her more of a in a coach's role now? Yes, she's your analyst, but would you almost perceive her as potentially being another coach in that environment?
Yeah, because she, again, like her perspective of how she sees things is a different lens than how myself and the assistant coach sees things. So, again, she's looking at things and she might go, she might pull something out and I sort of think, oh, well, I'd never thought of it that way. Or
I'm the simple brain.
Yeah.
The brain doesn't overcomplicate it.
Definitely. Definitely. I'd even though, because I hate the word analyst. I'm
You never
terrible.
get-
I never get it right.
Sounds like
You're
me.
not the only one.
I sometimes say the video kids.
Yeah.
Even worse. But,
I used to get called the camera girl.
oh gosh,
was
yeah,
like,
that would be me.
sure.
I'd call somebody something like that. Yeah, so I don't sort of view Brie as anything separate. She's just part of the management
Yep.
group. Yeah, which I think is just the relationship that we've been able to build over the years. So I know that what she can bring to the table, and I know that she always will share her point of view or share her observations around these are the things that I've noticed and I'm seeing, and especially if she thinks that's going to help us perform, and that's her role.
Yes.
That is,
Yes.
I see that as her role. I
Yep.
definitely see that as her role. I don't see her sitting separately and just
Yeah.
providing me with a whole lot of stats and numbers. I would be like, and what?
Yeah.
What's the why behind? Why do I need that? Yeah. So anyone could do that. In
Exactly.
my eyes, anyone can
Yes.
spit out some numbers.
Yeah.
It's how you interpret that and what that means going forward.
100%. Yeah, I just asked because I guess in some other environments I've seen that similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
Very much included as still with the title of analyst, but they're a member of the coaching group.
Yeah.
They're in all the management coaches meetings to try and help develop the game plans and structures and analyze the how teams are playing and very much important.
Yeah.
But I guess there's always still going to be that you're not a coach, you are the analyst.
Yeah.
But I feel like there is a crossover.
There is,
and
and like we have different channels for different chats and all that sort of stuff. I always include Brie in the feedback channel from the players so that she can see this is what they are saying, and she can look at it and go, is that what I'm seeing through the information that I've just gathered, what's come through from that? Yeah, and then she also, the great thing is like Bree's involved in when we're doing values and stuff, so she can see the things that we're trying to drive in our culture, our team culture and our performance culture, and then she also tries to weave that into her piece of the puzzle for the rest of our team too. So yeah, it's quite holistic and it's bigger than just that.
Yeah.
which it might have been previously.
Yeah.
Quite separate.
Yeah.
Yes.
over here.
Yeah.
I think it has been very separate, and now people are understanding the value of that extra person. And
Yeah, I think our environment's definitely benefited over the last 5 years of having someone stable in there. There was a lot of chopping and changing previously. How many seasons did you have? 2 or 3?
I think.
Yeah, so 2 seasons. My second season, I still had no idea what was going on. It wasn't until the 3rd, 4th season that I really kind of found my groove and what we were wanting and what was important to us. But also, there wasn't really a time before me that they travelled. Whereas pre-season, I'm with you in Otaki, I'm with you in Queenstown if we go to Queenstown or Timaru. There's times where I'm like, okay, I'm there, this is my sole focus. When you're not in that environment, you don't get that feeling of being in the team and you don't connect those dots together. And I think that's kind of how the Masters kind of started, was that you wanted someone to connect and be in the environment and kind of be able to travel with you and go places and kind of find things that we weren't really looking at before and kind of develop our space a little bit better. And that's kind of how I kind of entered the kind of environment, was because we wanted someone to be there. And as much as I'm not there in training weeks, I'm there at the start of the season, and that's the prep stuff that you kind of need. And it's also where I get to learn the players and what they've been looking at and what they're focusing on and how we are planning on playing. Like, I don't need to be there the whole time. I need to be there once you've found a solution or figured something out. I don't necessarily need to be there at the start of pre-season when you're meeting each other. The end of pre-season, when we're looking at games and looking at how we're playing, is where the most benefit kind of comes from.
Yeah.
Like, Otaki is always a great week. We always have a lot of learnings in Otaki. We had a good Otaki this year.
Look what happened.
Yeah, I know. We've had bad ones the years previously.
I've learned not to read in too much.
yeah.
Pre-season means nothing. It doesn't give you any points on the scoreboard.
That's right. You don't win a championship in pre-season.
Yeah. No. So, but pre-season's where I learn the most. It's where I learn the most from the girls, and that's why it's important that I'm there in pre-season and I'm there when we're away for that week.
Yep.
But then it would be nice to be there more often, but I don't think it's entirely necessary. The luxury of analysis is that we can be remote, which is quite nice. You can still do things from a distance.
Yep.
Everything can go over the internet. I can code games from here and they still get everything they need on the bench. I don't have to sit next to them. I don't sit next to you ever except in pre-season. Like, I don't need to be by your side as long as we have a connection.
I find that quite weird in other teams that I've been
When the analyst is on the
involved in.
bench.
Yeah, and I'm sort of thinking, what am I going to talk to this person about? Because I know I don't need that as such, because I've always had the information that I need in front of me on an iPad.
Yes.
And if there was something I even need, I'd probably pick my phone up and like, Brie.
I've had some phone calls in games.
So
Normally from the players being like, I don't know what this says.
the
The benchies.
so it is different when you do have somebody beside.
It's nice in pre-season to sit on the bench because I can hear what you're saying and I hear what we're aiming for.
Or like you say, it's your learning period. You get learning through that.
And we're trying to find out, is this what we need? And I'm like, Brie, what's going
Or
on
what
here?
you're talking about. What you're talking about on the bench, why would I not give you data about what you're talking about? I know Crofty's done research on that in terms of what people have said on the bench and what we're providing them and how does it align, and that's kind of where the structures came in to start with. Was if you're talking about structures in your team chats at half time, why are we not giving data about it? Why are we not telling you what is actually happening instead of your just perceived
I guess that's where
perception?
previous environments there was a bit of that disconnect.
So knowing what you're talking about on the side and hearing the team chats, knowing what the girls are talking about is really helpful to form your environment and form your analysis process. You can figure out what is actually needed and what you can strip away. And this year we simplified everything. The data collection itself had more stuff in it in the background, but what they got was way simpler.
Yeah, so you can pull on it if you need to.
And we used to use 2 code windows. I integrated everything into one this year. So it was all done at the same time rather than everyone you didn't have to go back into the game and code again to get something else out and code it again to get something else out. It was all in there all at once. So there was no extra labelling. I think we had 1 label window instead of 4. So knowing what we needed, what the girls wanted to know, what was important last year. Like we sat down, I think, might have been Timur. You didn't even remember what we'd done the year before. She was like, did we have that last year? And Dana, our manager, was like, yes.
That's great.
So like, it's never going to be the same. You're always going to have to change it. And that pre-season time is the important time, in my opinion, to figure out what we need. And then most of the time, so many changes. I think I was still running the old code window and old process in pre-season, and then changed it up for that first game, which can be daunting because you're like, I haven't had a trial run.
Yeah, right before.
Holy. Like, is it going to work? But if you've tested it enough on old games and compared your stats and made sure it's reliable against your old code window and your old definitions, then you're fine.
I do find now, like, if there's a really bad connection in the stadium and it drops out, I kind of do have a little moment. Oh my God, I need this. I really need this information. Do I need this? And, because you get so used to having it there.
Yes.
And for me, it just confirms things, or I go, yep. And then so when it's not there, you kind of do have like a little moment. And that's why I'm like, Brie, it's not working. Can you just give us, the key, the big
I'll get
rocks?
texts from Joe being like, it's not working. Like, sorry, just refreshed. It should be fine.
We had one game this year and the ball it was either a ball or a player came flying in the iPad, and they hit the iPad and it just went flying, and we were kind of watching it. It's like, oh no.
Good thing you didn't have the expensive one this year.
Wasn't good.
But that's that, I suppose, that connection and understanding from the start is just knowing what each other wants. Because I think that's what I struggled with a lot is you do set expectations and you kind of have a rough idea, but it's sometimes you're providing things that you're like, are they even going to use that?
Yeah.
It's just that next level relationship, hey,
Is
and
it
just
meaningful?
Yeah. and
Talking-
why are
but
you
it's even
using
the
it?
coaches understanding what they want as well.
Of those expectations. Do you have any like expectations you outlined to Bree like during that pre-season period or before pre-season? Do you have expectations on your analyst to?
Yeah, I think we, like at the start of each, before we go into each season, we do have a catch-up around, and because I very much believe she is the expert, and so that is her role to lead that space. And so I'm like, well, how do you see this rolling out
Yep.
this season? What's some innovation that we're going to bring?
Yep.
Because I think that's really important, because when you've been doing something for a number of seasons, if you just do the same thing again,
Can
you're just going to get
become
the same result.
insanity.
And it just becomes this thing that you do, but why are you doing it? So I always think, like, we always review what we're doing at the beginning of the season. And again, there's also, and she referred to it earlier about, in netball, sometimes we do like doing the same thing. So there's always going to be things that you do the same, but there always has to be something that's going to
Well, the sport doesn't change from year to year, does it?
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
gonna,
Yeah.
And the rules are changing a little bit
Yeah,
coming
they-
into
yeah,
this year coming, which will change a few things around short passes. It's going back to the old rule.
Do you have any expectations the other way? Do you set any expectations of your coaches?
Just clarity around what they want.
Yep.
I can only create something if they know what they're after.
Yeah.
I think that takes, like sometimes Brie will create something and she'll be like, have a look at this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we have to test it out, like in pre-season.
Yep.
We'll test it out and then,
We'll go backwards and forwards on things.
so we do have that little bit of to and fro. And again, with the players, is this what you need? And they're the same. I don't know what I need.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
though they're
That's often the case.
Yeah.
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 who, that's where you get the value. If
Yep.
you guys look at this, it might be quite useful.
Yep.
So we do have that moment of just trying to suss it out and figure out, right, what's important, what isn't important, what are the key bits and pieces. And then, like, I like to process things, so then I might go along and then could be some random day and oh, Brie, I need this. And she's so good at responding, and I think
Sometimes.
well, I think
been really
she is,
bad.
'cause
No.
I think sometimes it's, it can be quite random, and it might be just a feeling that something's happened during that week.
So you just need something to back up your gut feeling, or
yeah, and it might just be something a little bit left field that we haven't normally done, but I think, no, let's just add this in here, or let's just take it out, or whatever. So, and I always think she's pretty good at accommodating it and does it as timely as she
Yep.
can, because I do realise, again, she's only has a very limited time and resource
Yeah.
for us, but yeah, there's nothing that I ever think, oh, she hasn't done that. Like,
yeah. I guess from the analyst perspective, it's always nice having the coach going, can you look at this, this, and this?
Yeah.
You can build everything around that. Whereas sometimes you'll get a coach that hasn't been exposed to much, and they go, I don't know, what do you think? It's like,
Yeah.
oh God.
And
Like,
especially when
the
you haven't been
possibilities
in
are
that.
literally endless.
And we
so,
probably started that way,
Yeah,
being
we
like, well, what do you
definitely
want to do? I don't really mind.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then now we
yeah.
kind of know what is important to
Yeah,
us.
I think there was a definite couple of years where we just used what was
Done previously.
yeah, and then you soon figure out, like I had figured out, actually I don't need that. That's
Yep.
not what I need as a coach. And so I knew what I didn't need, but I wasn't sure what I needed.
Yep.
And so that was a starting point, because I'd be like, right, no, let's take this out. Oh, actually, let's put this in.
Yep.
So I think you can figure it out, and that's the beauty about coaching and developing. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's always evolving, and you're always learning and growing and extending and stretching and removing, and that's part of what we do, right?
Yep.
And we have like team reviews at the end of every phase. And there must have been something said, I don't know what it was, but something said in one of the reviews, and you emailed me the next day being like, can we remove this and add this? And I was like, yep, that's fine.
But that's really helpful from
Yeah.
the analyst
Yeah.
perspective, just that clarity.
Yeah.
And it's if the players aren't using it, what's the point of it being there?
Yeah.
And sometimes people are like, I need to give them this, every single inch of information that could possibly be created and put out there.
And then you go, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, are you using it? Like, what's the point? Like, yes, my code window can create all of this information for us, well, data that we can create information from, but why do I need all of it?
Yeah.
Is it going to influence anything? Is it going to like let us learn from it? Probably not. I don't need to know how many times the centre gets the ball. Like sometimes it might be helpful, but for our environment at the moment, it's not important to us how many touches a player has. It can be in other teams because that might be part of their structure or part of their playing philosophy. Like, yes, we play a possession game, but that doesn't mean the centre has to get every second pass. It just means we hold possession and we make the right choices. Whereas other teams will have things like, this is our dominant player, this person is the outlet every time. So there's no point giving every single inch of information if you're not going to use it. And if we don't need to use it, then it's not important to us. So why do we need to capture it? But then you also need to be flexible enough in your code window to have it in case someone asks for it later. So you don't have to go back through and code it all. So your depth of your code window has to be deep enough to be able to pull stuff out, but not utilize everything all at once. You have to know what you need from that code window. I have so much in my code window that we don't use.
But it's there just in case.
Yeah, it's there in case I sometimes get a question like, how much does this team use shooter-to-shooter passes? Just for example, not that you've ever asked me that. But
One day you might.
it's there if you ever want it. I think I make comments on it sometimes in the scout reports, but I don't need to present that to the people. I can just say, this team uses it more than other teams. I don't have to tell them how many times, as long as I can pull it out, but I don't have to present it. Having that depth, but not showing everything.
No, awesome. I think moving forward, hopefully, like coaches, players, and analysts are going to have more understanding about each other, about the environments, and what I think just stating the expectations from the start, hopefully that happens.
Did your coaches have expectations of you that were communicated?
And I think at the start of the season, they were communicated, but then I think sometimes I had questions that necessarily weren't answered, or I couldn't provide them what they needed because I didn't have the time. And I think, like as you said, having another job, there's just some things that you're like, I just can't fit that into the time. And I think expectations from the start were communication. That was probably the biggest, just keeping up the comms. This season compared to last season was so much better in the fact that I was more involved in the management group and in the player chat, and we had meetings each week, and I understood what the focus was for the season more than last season. Whereas last season I was just like, like cool, this is awesome. Whereas this year I was like, right, this is what they want, this is what they need. Sometimes I could provide that, sometimes I couldn't. I did what I could. I felt like I committed pretty well this year, and it was so cool being part of that environment. And it's so much better when you feel part of the team and you feel part of that management group and you feel valued. And you get players coming up to you and like thanking you for everything you do, and coaches being like, we appreciate that, Maddie, like, or do this only if you can, and having that understanding. And it was so cool that we made it to the final this year, and I was buzzing. It was so fun, and just knowing that you've been a part of that development and growth throughout the season is pretty cool. But definitely important from the get-go to set those boundaries and have a relationship and have that trust. But I think a number one thing for me is the communication, because
Comms are definitely key.
you can have some I've had a few situations where I don't know what they want and need, and then I'm like, well, I can't do much for you, kind of thing. But I'm hoping from this is coaches kind of start understanding we need to involve them more, we need to get them knowing what we want more, and vice versa as well.
That's probably where my question about the analyst becoming part of being a coach was, because I've heard in the past, analysts will probably just become coaches and they'll be a coach. I don't think they will. I think analysts will. It's a unique skill set. So they bring their own skills. They're not a coach, but they're part of the coaching group, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't think they will become a coach. They will still be the analyst, but yeah, there's a little bit of crossover, I guess, in their role, but if that makes sense.
I just think you have to be a part of that team. You have to be a part of that group. Like, you can't just be on the outside. You got to know what's going on.
Your coaches are there to do the coaching. Your
Yeah.
analysts to support them, and
And you can't support them if you don't know what's going on, or they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
But I think that again is with that amateur side, not necessarily knowing, haven't worked with an analyst, but that's just that working together and communicating that, hey, like, I don't actually know how to use you properly. How can I do it? And
that's a good conversation to start with.
Exactly. So maybe that, so many opportunities for growth in the industry, I reckon.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it changes over the next few years with the increases in technology, as well as, like, yes, AI is a big topic across a lot of different things, but I don't think it'll take over our jobs. It'll provide us more time to do other things, which provides us more access to do things that are more effective.
Yeah.
And gives us more time to dig into things that we can actually change rather than having to just do the surface analysis. We can actually focus on a project or explore something else that we wouldn't have had time to. So if that creates a sense of innovation around research and how the evidence kind of grows in that research world that we can then integrate within our applied group would be quite nice. I mean, research is often very much lab-based, isn't really applicable, but thankfully in the PA space you do get some that is applied, so you can take it and pull things out and figure out what's right for us. There's like Ant Bedford's stuff over in Sunshine Coast. He's obviously with the Silver Ferns as well, but some of his articles on, he's got some stuff in the synergy kind of space and like player recognition kind of AI stuff with some of his PhD students. That stuff will start to become applicable from that research setting, which will be quite exciting to see how it kind of changes from there. But yeah.
Cool. Awesome. We better cut it there.
Been going
Been
for long enough.
yarning for a while. But no, thank you guys so much for coming on board.
That's okay.
I really appreciate it. Some awesome knowledge. And I've said this on every episode, but I just appreciate hearing all your stories, and everyone's got different experiences, so it's cool to learn, and hopefully people listening will feel the same way. But yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Inviting us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Sweet. Dunskies. Kia ora. If you're hearing this message, you have watched the entire episode. For that, ngā mihi, thank you for listening to Analyst's Point of View. Also, ngā mihi to the guests. I appreciate your contribution to this episode. I hope you found value in watching this episode and listening to the guests' experiences within the performance analysis industry. If you did, please give it a like and share with others who you believe may be interested. This contribution will continue to help grow the understanding of what performance analysis is and what analysts do. Ngā mihi I tō tautoko I a au. Thanks for your support of me. Kia ora.